Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me Dr. Pat Reiff. She's a professor at Rice University. She offers her students a class called Physics of Ham Radio. Her call sign is W5TAR. Thank you for joining me, Pat.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with your ham radio background. When did you get licensed and when did you get that call sign, W5TAR?
Well, when I was a graduate student, there was a lot of hams that were technicians and engineers, and they encouraged me to learn about the hobby. And I passed my novice exam, but I never got the CW passed. I never really tried it because I was so busy with my thesis. So I didn't get my license in the 70s when I should have. I actually waited till my son was in the Boy Scouts and was at a winter camp on January 1st of the 2000, and I took the ham radio license exam then and got my license in 2000, and I ended up upgrading to extra. And then when I was looking for a vanity call, because I'm an astronomer, the nice thing about W5TAR is it says star. And so that made me feel good. I also talk on the Rice Ham Club call sign, so you might hear me as W5YG.
So I'd like to hear more about your ham radio experience, but I'm stuck on grad program in astronomy. Tell me more about what you were studying, what your thesis was in, and a little bit more about your professional career.
Yes, well, I'm very fortunate that I've been involved in some really exciting spacecraft missions over my career. I started graduate school at Rice University in 1971, and I was accepted both in the physics department and the space science department. And I said, well, who's got a summer job? Because I don't have anything to do after my graduation from college. And they said, well, we just put an experiment on the moon on Apollo 14, and we're looking for someone with computer programming experience that can help with the data analysis. And I said, me. and I've basically been counting electrons and protons in space ever since. I got my PhD then analyzing data from Apollo 14, and then I did a postdoc at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And then I came back to Rice on the research faculty, and then eventually got promoted into the tenure track faculty, and I've been here ever since. 48 years now teaching at Rice.
That seems like an exciting career, and I'm going to show my naivete. I don't totally understand. Were you actually working for NASA, or were you working at Rice at the time? What was the relationship?
Okay, as a graduate student, I was working for Rice University, but under a NASA fellowship, student fellowship. Okay. And then for my postdoc, I was working at NASA, but under National Academy of Sciences postdoc. And then since I've been back at Rice, again, I'm working at Rice, but I've had a succession of NASA and NSF grants that have funded me to work with now 8 spacecraft missions through my career. And I'm working right now on one called the Magnetospheric Multiscale Mission. My previous one was Image, where we flew the longest dipoles ever in space, 500 meters tip to tip. So if you think you got a long dipole, we had one longer.
So, with all the recent conversation about NASA and SpaceX, you must be picking up the newspapers every day and entranced by what's going on.
Oh, it's very, very exciting. Of course, since I started my career analyzing data from the moon, I was at the mission control when Apollo 15, 16, and 17 took off from the moon, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I am particularly excited about sending humans, and especially women, back to the moon.
So, tell me about your classes other than physics for ham radio operators. Tell me about those classes at Rice. What else do you teach?
Well, for many years, I taught the sophomore non-majors class in the solar system and astronomy, and it was a 2-semester course. And I love teaching Rice undergrads. They're very smart and they're very dedicated. And even though this was the non-majors course, they were really engaged. However, back in the late 80s, I started a partnership with the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and we put in an NSF proposal to get teachers involved in actual research. And so we did a teacher research program in the summer of 88, 89, and 90, and got teachers involved, and we got them actual academic credit. And I got to thinking, I could put together a master's program for teachers that's content stressed. And so that's what basically we did. And I've been teaching teachers now primarily for the last 10 years in the Master of Science teaching program. Actually, the last 20 years. Time flies. In the Master of Science teaching program. And I do a 4-course series with them. And one is solar system, one is astronomy and astrophysics, one is teaching astronomy laboratory, and one is the physics of ham radio. So I get them to get their ham radio license, and so then they can teach ham radio in their classes.
Well, now that I understand your professional trajectory better, I can totally forgive you for not actually getting on the air back in the 70s when you first got licensed. But you had mentioned that you kind of got reinvigorated in ham radio when your son was in the Boy Scouts. Was it just the fact that he was interested that brought you back into the fold, or was it the other way around?
Well, I was an assistant Boy Scout leader and an assistant Girl Scout leader because I had boy-girl twins. And when I went to these special camps, they had classes for the kids, and the adults could take them too. I actually ended up taking my swimming license, lifeguard license at a different summer camp. So actually, my son did not get his license. I did.
So was that the beginning then of you starting to think that you might want to put a ham radio program together in the summer camps yourself? And then did that lead to the Rice University program?
Yes, absolutely. The Houston Museum of Natural Science has a series of summer camps for children, and we talked about it and said, this might be a fun thing to do to get the kids their ham radio license. And we did it for like 3 summers in a row. But you had to do the whole thing in a week, and that's kind of tough for young kids. And yet there were, we had a lot of licenses for kids as young as 8. And one of them, an 8-year-old girl and her 10-year-old big brother, are still ham active, radioactive, as we say, even today from that ham class. So, but I kind of went away from the summer camps because actually that's when I need to do my own research. and I figured teaching teachers has a better multiplier effect than individually teaching little kids. So we kind of stepped away from the summer camps and went more to the actual classes. And so I have both Rice undergraduates and teacher graduate students both taking this class.
So tell me when physics of ham radio, when that first entered your mind that this might be a good idea. And I'm sort of curious before we get into the content of that class and the students, did it take some convincing to have that get on the curriculum?
Well, that's a good question. The Rice has always been a very exciting place to do teaching and research because they're open to new ideas and new suggestions. And we had a ham radio club on the books since almost 100 years now, and but it was pretty inactive. And I thought, this is time. We need to get this back going. And we need to get a cadre of people with licenses that are, younger than 50, and get Rice back on the air. And so it helps that I was the director of the Master of Science teaching program, that I could propose this class, and it got accepted.
So now tell me about the class. Outline what kind of the length of time that students are committed to this and how you put that class together.
Well, all of my classes I do on 3 hours, one one evening a week, and this is for the convenience of the teachers because they're still in the classroom, and in fact, it's a pretty hefty commitment for them. But they can participate by Zoom if they can't get there that day. Although I really do encourage them to come as often as possible and get hands on with the equipment, because you really do learn more about procedures and conversations and all of those things that are not really covered in the ham exam, as how to talk on the air and not interrupt people and things like that. So and then we do a little electronics lab where I have them basically prove vehicles IR by by doing patch cords and measuring voltages and resistances, and we're going to do that next week. So, but because it's a RICE class, I have to have learning objectives, and I have to prove that the people learn those learning objectives. So it's part of an accreditation process that I have to, prove that they're learning every year.
And tell me about the students that you're attracting. What's the type of student that decides that they'd like to take this class?
Primarily right now, we're drawing students both from the Master of Science Teaching program and the Master of Space Sciences program. So the Master of Space Sciences is more of a research slash administration class where they really are training them to become professionals in commercial space activities. And so one of the things that we are working on at Rice is a CubeSat. And that CubeSat needs a radio on it to bring the data down. And so we have a team of students that are working on the CubeSat that are also taking the class because they want their license and they want to be able to legally command the spacecraft. Fortunately, it's all UHF, VHF, and so they really only need a technician license.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that there's a very specific need and therefore motivation to take the class. But you must hear from some of these students, why do people do this as a hobby? Why are they doing this now in the day of internet and cell phones? Why is there even such a thing as amateur radio? And I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you hear that? And how do you answer it if it's the case?
Oh, I attack that first thing, first session. Why do this? But you remember, I live in Houston. And we had a hurricane this year, and we had Hurricane 2017, and we had a derecho, and we've had all kinds of things where we've had major power outages, major storms, and that communication in emergencies is very much intriguing to the students. We also have events like the Houston Marathon that the amateurs, go along the route and call in help if some of the runners are getting in trouble. So, and just generally there's a ton of storm chasers in Houston. So, I think that has been a big attraction for the students as well.
Do you find that the students have interest in HF also, or is it primarily VHF and UHF?
I encourage them, obviously, to get their general so they can move on to HF. And of course, we do a lot of third-party traffic while we're teaching them. And we've now, set up our rig to run FT8 and do all the easy digital modes. Although, when I showed them FT8, and, as we were talking, I made like 4 contacts, including Russia and Saudi Arabia. And, and they go, but you didn't really talk to them, did you? I said, you're right. I think they really enjoyed the nets more because they could actually talk to people. And they thought that was great fun.
So you mentioned the Rice University ham radio station, therefore, I presume a club. Have you seen that get more use over the past few years?
Well, again, part of this is my fault because I only offer this class, every other year for one semester, and it's very active for that semester. But the other 3 semesters, I hate to admit it, but I'm deep into my own personal science research. And of course, last year I was deep into the eclipse because my study involves the solar corona, the space weather, the solar wind. And in fact, we're having a solar wind event right now as we speak. That one of the things I do is predict space weather, and we just sent out a red alert this morning. So who knows? We might have auroras in the lower 48 tonight, but it really depends on whether the solar wind stays very active, which it appears to maybe be dying down.
So, Pat, one of the questions I have for you, when I read about this and you at Rice University, I thought it was very unusual for a college or university to be offering a ham radio class. Do you think that's correct, or are there others like you across the country?
That's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that. I've never done a survey. I will say that it's the physics of ham radio. Okay, so the first half of the class we go through electronics, electricity and magnetism, waves, antenna, propagation, polarization, and they get their license. But then the second half of the class is the sun, the ionosphere, the space weather, the magnetosphere, the things that I do for my research. And so I think that's why NASA is happy to give me some money to help support the teachers taking this class is through my NASA space weather outreach programs. So I benefit from that NASA connection of space weather. And I really can't tell you. I wish there were more, but I don't know if there are any others similar in the country or not.
So, Dr. Reiff, one of the things that gets discussed a lot is the future of ham radio, how not only we can increase the size of that community. I think there's 750,000 plus or minus licensed hams. Then there's a question about how many people are actually active, and then another portion not on the HF bands, maybe on VHF. But anyways, it's still an ongoing conversation about how do we increase that. And that conversation always goes, how do we get young people involved? What would your answer be to that? And I guess I'd ask you to expand it beyond somebody in your class that has a very specific space orientation. What do you think the secret is to increasing the activity with ham radio operators and the number of licensed ham radio operators?
I think one way to get more young people involved is to do more of these summer camps. And, if I weren't just one person, I would probably try to do more. I know the Boy Scouts have a ham radio badge. I don't think the Girl Scouts do right now, but field days are a good way to bring youth in. But again, I don't know that they're really well advertised. One thing that we are going to do actually next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, is the Texas QSO party, where you try to make contacts across the state. And that also turns out to be the day of the equinox. So we're going to have a solar event at the Sundial at the Houston Museum of Natural Science on Saturday, the 21st. And hopefully we'll have a ham station there and let the people get on the air. I think actually talking to somebody and having somebody answer is, the eyes just light up. I'm really speaking over the air, and it's not typing in a computer. It's something I'm doing on a radio with batteries.
I think that's an excellent point. Sometimes the conversation is just theoretical, right? Until there's actually those knobs and buttons in front of you and you're hooking up an antenna and you actually make that contact with somebody around the world, you don't really get that high that we get from being on the air. So I usually start these conversations off with more about your own ham radio experience, my guest's ham radio experience. And as I said earlier, I skipped past that because I was so anxious to get to the academic piece. But tell me about your own operating practices. You're obviously involved with the QSO party. I believe you're involved with VHF because you held up a rig a second ago. But tell me more about how you personally get on the air and how frequently you do that.
Again, because I'm a full-time professor and a full-time researcher, and a grandmother, I don't have as much time as I could for hobbies. So I'm usually very, very active. Like this semester, which is the semester I'm teaching, I'm maybe on the air almost every day. But in a typical non-teaching semester, I'm on our local club nets on Tuesday and Wednesday night, and I may hop on for an HF net here and there using the Rice rig. I had a HF UHF long wire at my ranch, and when I was out there on the weekends, I would do some operations there. But Hurricane Ike brought down my antenna, and my kids, graduated from college, and they stopped going out much on the weekends, and so I kind of had to. I kind of let that antenna lie for a while, and so I normally am only doing HF at the Rice station, which is much better quality. I've got a 20 meter and a 40 meter, a 10 meter and a 20 meter inverted dipole there, as well as a satellite tracking antennas. So we've got a much better rig at Rice, so I'd much rather use it there.
Well, Dr. Reiff, you clearly have a busy schedule, and I'm so impressed with all the balls you keep up in the air, and really honored that you were able to spend a little bit of time with me this morning. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to do so. 73.
I've been talking to Dr. Pat Reiff, W5TAR. She's really doing fantastic work teaching people and opening their eyes to ham radio, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for joining me.